All right, guys, it is 2022. Mortgage rates might be going up, and we're here to tell you how that impacts you and your buying power. Pete, what's going on, man? It's a new year.
What's up, Scott? Yeah, new year, ready to rock and roll. Should have an interesting year coming up this year. Definitely some things happening, so let's talk about it.
Yeah, man. I feel like this is a conversation that it's always tough as a realtor, especially like anytime your client turns around or, anybody reaching out asking about like, hey, like, what do you think is going to happen with mortgage rates? It's like that weird conversation where I don't want to say with any certainty that they will go up. And yet we know there's a lot of market indicators going on right now that point to the idea that mortgage rates are likely heading upwards in 2022. So,
well, I'd say we can say with absolute certainty that rates will go up. We can't say with certainty when they will go up, right? We know when we're looking at, 2.5% and 3%. And I know what you mean, but yeah, it's always a rough position to be in, but we know that rates are going to go up. It's just a matter of when. And a lot of the conversations that I've been having with a lot of my buyers and just clients in general is not so much when rates are going up, but when home values are coming down. So I think the focus has really been more on the home values, not the interest rates. And you could argue that maybe the focus really should be on the interest rates.
Yeah, well, and I think, one of the things that will likely cause mortgage rates to go up at some point is to create a little bit of that balancing act with the fact that home prices have gone up at such a historic rate that I think things need to get a little bit more balanced out, right? On a side note, I just saw somebody post in the town of Waldwick, there's one house on the market currently. So these things in the market are unheard of. And so I think mortgage rates will come into play as a means to somewhat get things back into a little bit more balance. But you're talking about the interest rates. Like, how is that going to impact buyers in 2022?
Yeah. So, and something to keep in mind too is sometimes even the reason they raise rates is so that they can lower them, right? If rates are so low and God forbid something else happens, it's a good way for the economy to be triggered again, right? Lowering interest rates helps prop up, the buying power and things like that. So there is a need for wanting to raise the interest rates. So if in a pinch, we can lower them again. But so yeah, how is that going to affect buying power? So I actually have a nice little graphic that I can share with you here. And this is our first time sharing something on Google here. So if for whatever reason it doesn't show up, we'll make sure that we post it in our story and in the comments below. So yeah, so what you see here and is how it's going to affect your buying power.
Yeah, so we looked at this before, and we hope it's showing up during the recording, and if not, check out the comments below, and you'll get the infographic that we're looking at here. So it's working on the assumption here that the buyer has gone and gotten pre-approved, and let's just say for our argument's sake, their max payment that they can afford is $2,500, right?
Yep, that's where they're comfortable. That's what allows them to still save money, right? Because you never know what happens just in life. Pay all their other bills and be in good shape. $2,500 is what they want their payment to be at.
And I know we've talked about like interest rates have been hovering like high 2s, low 3s for basically at least the last 12 months, basically.
At least, maybe even a little bit longer.
Yeah, and I see this infographic is kind of taking into consideration that right now, like January to March of this year, rate at 3.3, that buyer can go out and purchase a $370,000 home with what, an assumption on about $10,000 in taxes?
Yeah, somewhere between 10 and 12, but with 10% down.
Okay, cool. And that keeps them safe at that $2,500 payment. And that's something that we always talk about with our buyers, right? Is like, because sometimes I send buyers to the mortgage lender and they get news that they can afford way more house than they ever intended for, right? And the conversation is, well, what's the comfort point, right? Of what your monthly payment is. That's so important. That drives everything. In terms of, the way that people can enjoy their lifestyle and also own a house. So here though, 370, they're going out, they're shopping. And I guess as the chart creeps on here, like The concern here being if rates were to jump up in this example, 0.4 points by the end of the year, let's round that up and even call it half a point. What happens?
Yeah, you go from being able to afford, an approval at $2,500 monthly payment from 370,000 to 353.
So you drop basically 20 grand in buying power simply with a 0.5% increase in mortgage rate.
Yeah, that's what we're looking at. We know that when rates go up, buying power goes down, right?
Yeah.
And we also know that, and maybe we're not ready to transition to that, but we'll talk a little bit about how that's going to affect the market moving forward. But this is an example here of where I think that the focus really should be more on what the interest rate is. And over the last year to 2 years, I know we did a lot of focusing on what the purchase price was and what home values are, with good reason. I understand why that was the conversation, but now here we are. I feel, we've been talking about this for 2 years now. When rates start to go up, what are we going to see? And I think we're really going to see that this year.
Yeah, well, and that's a tough position to be in, because I would imagine, the buyer that's out shopping and has that, hard stop. In this example, it's 2,500, and they're looking for $373,000 home. Like, I mean, in that example, that's a little bit of a needle in the haystack. And then to lose $20,000 of buying power, you're all of a sudden looking at a different quality of home, I think, right?
You're going from like single families to condos and townhouses.
Which
Maybe
could,
no, well, that's
yeah.
20,000.
But you're making a sacrifice. At a $20,000 drop in buying power means you're leaving something off of the wants and needs list. And what I'm also like, I guess the reason why this is also so impactful is because what's lost there is, right, like, if you lost $20,000 worth of buying power with a 0.5% interest hike rate, rate hike, simultaneously, I think what you referenced, right, the home price is what buyers have been so concerned with. Is like, oh, am I overpaying? I'm going to wait until home values start to drop. And yet what happens in reality is, every expert that I read up on right now says there's not likely going to be the kind of astronomical increase in home prices that we've seen over the last 18 months, 12 months in 2022. But there is likely going to continue to be, that more average 3 to 6% increase in home values this year. So if simultaneously you're losing $20,000 of buying power, and that home that you're searching for is still at the same time going up in value, you're broadening that gap. So, right, a $400,000 house goes up 6%. That's $25,000 added onto that list price, minus your 20,000 buying power. Just by interest rates going up 0.5%, you could be potentially looking at losing 50 grand worth of buying power. So
100%. And I just want to back up real quick. I'm not saying the difference between a single family house and a condo or townhouse is $20,000. So that was a crisscross. But in a situation like that, right? Yeah, where you are losing $20,000 of buying power, and the market, then brings up the properties another, say, 5%, right? That 370 house is almost 400 now. So, and you can afford 353 in this particular example.
Well,
but I think.
Yeah, and it's just, I want to drive home that point that, like, I think in a vacuum, that's where buyers in a perfect world would love nothing more than to wait until prices drop, right? Like, wouldn't it be awesome if we could all sit here with a crystal ball and say, hey, like, I'm going to wait until this house is worth X, the point in time where it's at the bottom of the chart, and I'll buy it right there. But you don't get to make that decision in a vacuum. You have to do it in the reality of, well, if you wait until it's down here at the bottom and you hope that you just pull up the chance of perfectly timing things to buy at the bottom of the market, right? Because to me, there's no sense in buying here and saying, oh, well, the prices have dropped a little bit over the last year, so now I'm comfortable buying. Well, if you're in a depreciating market, it's going to keep going down. So you don't want to play this game of timing the market. And again, going back to that vacuum point, is you wait for that perfect moment at the bottom of the market. And what were interest rates like when the market was bad? 6, 7, 8%. That was only, 10 to 12 years ago, we were looking at rates like that. And we just showed how interest rate has a big determining factor in monthly payment. So you might get a better deal and then end up paying more in interest rate, which means you're still paying a huge monthly payment. So
that's it. And you're paying more to interest.
Yeah.
You're paying more to interest than the actual house. I mean, yeah, I think, you hit on pretty much all the points there. I mean, I think, my best prediction of what we're going to see this year is that I think when rates start to go up, you're going to see a buying frenzy. People who were getting beat up last year, who waited till this year to see what it's going to go. Now the rates are going up. Now you're going to get a little bit more of that uptick where you might see closer to 20% appreciation of, sale price. But then I think we are going to see it cool off a little bit. But the bottom line is it all depends on how many people put their home on the market. I think, that's the next, first it's interest rates. And then I think if we start to see a lot of people putting their homes on the market, then yeah, it might level out a little bit. But if there's still low inventory, I can't imagine much less than a 6% appreciation, year over year, even still.
Yeah. And it's a balancing act. I mean, this correlation between the rates and inventory levels and, inflation, there's so many factors at play. And I guess, I know we're coming up on time here. So, what is the rosy version of the picture we just said today? Like, should you go out and buy a house right now?
I mean, that's always dependent on the specific person, right? I mean, if it were me and I were looking to buy a house this year, I would be trying to do it in Q1, the first quarter, maybe second quarter, just because we know what we're up against now.
Yeah.
But with all that being said and predictions and analysis, we don't really know. What we do know is in all likelihood, rates are going to be going up this year. We don't know how much and we don't know when. We know that rates are in the low threes right now. So, I mean, I don't ever want to be that guy who's saying now's a great time to buy, but now could potentially be the best time to buy all year. Something else I wanted to throw out there too is we have the capability of running these types of scenarios for you. So if you're interested in kind of just, hey, well, what would it look like if I were buying it this with that, or, I want to keep my payment here, what can I afford? Just reach out to us. We're happy to give you some preliminary numbers if you're not ready to talk to a lender. Or even if you just want to learn more about what the future of this year is, which we already pretty much disclosed, we don't 100% know, but we'd be happy to have this conversation with you.
Yeah, and that's a good point too, man, because I know we ran that scenario based on like an assumption of 10% down payment, and yet so many things factor into that, right? Like you don't need a 10% down payment. You don't need a 20% down payment. You could be putting down as little as 3 to 5%, and you could accomplish home ownership on that. So like Pete said, if you're curious about the numbers, I do think, right now is a great time to be buying. Don't get scared by, doom and gloom, stuff that might be out in the news. Talk to the real people that are boots on the ground. That's me and Pete. And
well, one last thing real quick too, is,
yeah.
and just to what we kind of covered, but I just want to kind of lay it out, is this is a little bit of a different market because typically, and what I've been saying a lot is as rates go up, you're going to see the home values kind of level off, not come crashing back down. But it's so hard to tell. And being that there's lower inventory, we don't know where the rates are going to backslide, right? So I think you pretty much hammered the point home when you were talking about trying to time the market, right? I mean, I wish I could have bought Tesla when it was at the bottom, right? And knowing where it was going to go, but you can't do it. So just really that you could end up waiting another year, say, well, they're still too high. But to your point with inflation, interest rates, and low inventory, there's no, in my estimation, early signs that home values are going to come crashing, crumbling down.
Yeah, and I think it's always a home run when you can lock into, like you said earlier, we know the rates are great right now. So if you're thinking about buying a house, deal with certainty, right? Get out there, find yourself an awesome home, lock into that amazing rate. Low threes is historically low, and get yourself into a good home in 2022.
100%. And, that pretty much does it for me. I'll end up starting off a whole nother conversation. We'll be talking for another 5 episodes. So,
well, till next time, guys, I'm Scott.
I'm Pete.
See you guys then.